very quick one because I was curious. Is this available now? How much is it? When can we get it? Can I freeze? Well, when can you freeze me?
I think
I might be too old already.
In the Bay Area or throughout the United States, I think this will become available city by city in the next 12 months. The first cities, I would say, in the next 3 months. And it will take us maybe a year and a half to have it all over the States. Probably the Bay Area by the end of the year.
So you're testing a lot of things. And we both heard the talk of Riccardo Sabatini, a TED speaker. I don't know if you have seen his talk, but he basically predicts that we'll test for so many more things. That when you sequence the DNA, you can basically not only test, but also improve the babies, the future babies. So that TED talk, Riccardo Sabatini explains that you can have literally superpowers. So they have sequenced so many humans now that they can see that you can, for example, isolate genes for better vision, or better bones structure, or being totally immune to AIDS. So is that the future of Prelude, that we'll have a catalog, and we'll be like, okay, I would like better bone structure, better vision for my baby. I would like, and you check for boxes like a Chinese menu?
Well, Prelude is about empowering people to have more choices. We are not advocating making better, stronger, smarter babies. We are advocating having healthy babies whenever you're ready. CRISPR, which is the technology that allows for genetically changing embryos, has been used on animals, and it's being tried on humans for the first time. I think CRISPR is a phenomenal technology to cure illnesses too, and I would try to use it more for that than to make super people or superhumans.
But like eye color, let's forget the superhumans, but like, where do you stop?
The plastic surgery for babies?
No, but you can really literally choose a lot of things, right?
So, well, the only important, the main thing you can choose now.
It could be like Tinder, right?
You
get 10 embryos.
You can choose gender. Now you can choose gender. That's a big one.
But why not eye color and hair color? And would you like them tall? A little taller, maybe. You know, and then like.
Yeah. Well, I'm not about that. We're not about that. We don't offer that. If somebody's looking for a designer baby, we're not the place. But if you're looking for a healthy baby, whenever you're ready, we are the place. Now, will people want designer babies in the future? I mean, if you ask me my personal opinion as a father of 6 children with one coming, I just want them healthy, okay? I love them all. I don't think there's better and worse babies. I don't know, I just don't have that mentality. I'm sure some people will.
But if I told you this one will be a little smarter.
Look, I have some Chinese friends, so I mentioned these two, and they were very interested in that angle. They were like interested in a baby that will compete better and do better. And there may be people who are interested in that angle. As of today, in any case, those things, multifactorial genes that code for these things, we don't really know them as of today. If people freeze now, when they make the baby, will they have choices like that? Probably they will. Personally, I would be happy people had healthy babies when they're ready.
And I hope you don't mind my questions, but this is Singularity University, so we have to project ourselves. I don't see why it wouldn't happen. Questions from the audience?
My question is basic. Once this methodology, they're going to prevent lots of diseases. You were thinking about selling this not only for people, but for governments, because you're going to prevent diseases. And probably if you ask people to froze the frozen sperm, something like this, they're going to ask you to pay some money, right? So if you put it like for really cheap and governments pay for that, maybe they're going to prevent some disease in the near future and save lots of money.
Well, there are some governments, like the government of Israel, that's already paying for some of the elements of Prelude. For example, egg freezing. There's corporations that are paying for some of the elements of Apple, Facebook, Google. are paying for some of the, in fact, with the allowance that the employees of Apple, Facebook, and Google have, they could afford 3 babies, 3 Prelude babies, without any problem, because it's not so expensive to have Prelude babies, because you show up when you're fertile. So it's not like this $45,000 baby. A Prelude baby is going to be more like an $8,000 baby than a $45,000.
So that's going to be the price, $8,000?
We don't know exactly, but we think it's going to be something like that. Yeah. It's going to be, in fact, we're working on this now. It's going to decrease over time.
For most people.
Well, if you can, the question is to have a sense of priority. If you, let's say $8,000 to have a child, and you could say, well, sex is free, right? It is free, but it fails a third of the time. It's kind of like a third of the time over a life, not a third of the time one time. So is it free, really, when you have such a failure rate, when you have congenital illness, when you have chromosomal abnormalities? The illnesses that you would prevent are such things as cystic fibrosis or sickle cell anemia, thalassemia, Huntington disease. You would make people, but to answer that question, of course governments have an incentive and insurance companies have an incentive, because the best way to lower healthcare costs is not to get ill. When people say America spends 17% of GDP, $3 trillion in healthcare, you can either pay everyone less or you cannot get sick. That would be a very good way of lowering healthcare costs. And congenital illness may be a quarter of all that spending. So one way to do genetic sequencing, also because now genetic sequencing involves not only the things that kill you when you're 2, involves things that kill you later in life, like breast cancer genes and many more genes that we're discovering that lead to certain conditions. So when you're fertile, you produce a lot of embryos. If you have cystic fibrosis, you're positive for cystic fibrosis, only 1 embryo in 4 will have cystic fibrosis. So one embryo in 4 will have these conditions. So just having healthy babies lowers your healthcare costs.
But Martin, there is a case, like there is actually a book about this. You probably will help me with the title, but that the most successful people on the planet, I'm thinking about Sergey Brin and others, actually have issues. And so if you correct all the illnesses before we were born, you'll have very different population coming out.
Well, Sergey, I happen to know personally, I don't think he has issues, but I see what you mean, though.
No, he's been campaigning for...
you mean yes, that he tested positive for, for Parkinson. That
yes.
Prelude doesn't say that people who have genetic illnesses shouldn't be treated. People who have we should do everything we can to possibly cure the people who have genetic conditions so these conditions don't express themselves like in Parkinson and all that, and that's a very good point. But there are so many illnesses that we don't know how to cure, but we know how to diagnose. We know how to prevent by just not choosing the embryos that have them. So we're much more ahead in diagnoses. Like there's so many illnesses, especially cancer, that we know how to diagnose and we don't know how to cure. Cancer is the biggest one. Cardiovascular disease of some kind we don't know how to cure, and there's so much more we can recognize than cure that is more likely that we'll be able to stop certain cancers, let's say at the embryo level, than when you're a grown-up. And that's why we believe acting at the embryo level is important. But of course, we should try to do everything we can to cure the people who have those illnesses now. But if you ask these people who have these illnesses now, would you have your child to have the same? They probably would say, no, I don't want my child to have the same illness.
Can we do a quick poll here? How many of you will tell your daughter to freeze her eggs before 30? That's...
half?
I would say more,
40?
Probably 60% of a room. So, yeah, you have a nice business opportunity here. Questions? There's one here. I would love a woman question.
Yeah.
Yeah, over there. Sorry. Because it cannot be... here you go.
Hi, thank you. I'm from Germany. I'm an OBGYN actually, and I was working in fertility for the last year. And I have a question. If you freeze your eggs for, let's say, 10 years, what would that do with the eggs, like with regard to quality?
Yeah, that's a great question, because it's not that the duration of the time is important. It's the takeoff and landing. Let's say it's not cruising altitude. When you're at minus 186 in liquid nitrogen, some people believe you could hold the eggs for 1,000,000 years or 100,000 years, or like it really doesn't matter. The problem is how you freeze and how you thaw. And that was only discovered quite recently, how to do it well and reliably. So historically, freezing eggs was a terrible idea. Now, it's a very good idea, provided that you do it when you're fertile. And whatever you freeze, I mean, I've been looking at the data from frozen donor egg banks, and frozen donor egg banks need 2.4 eggs to make a baby. That's a pretty low ratio, 2.4 eggs to make a baby. But of course, they get 25-year-old fertile women. They get 25-year-old women. So it depends very much at what age. Whatever you have, you will freeze at whatever stage you were in your life. But then quantity goes in your favor. So if you freeze 13, 14, 15 eggs, and you want one baby, and you're 40, you're still quite likely to get one out of those 15 eggs. But basically, from what I've seen, one egg of a 25-year-old woman is like 2 eggs of a 30-year-old woman, is like 4 eggs of a 35-year-old woman, and it's like 12 eggs of a 40-year-old woman if she can make eggs.
Martin, will there be a stock exchange for eggs? Like you can have a journalist egg, or you can have a presidential egg?
When you have your own, when you use your own eggs.
But you could think about that, right? Like that's a lot of eggs frozen.
Well,
so then you can go and
let's put it another way. That in America, there's 500,000 frozen embryos that people don't know what to do with them, right?
Well, here you
so
go.
People did IVF. They have leftover embryos. They feel bad about destroying these embryos, and they don't know what to do with them. I don't think it will be a stock exchange because I don't think it's a question of money. But I think.
Well, there is. Wait. Like if you are a Harvard graduate right now, you get offers up to $50,000, $60,000, $70,000, $80,000 for eggs.
Yeah, well, it's true.
It's true.
It's
up
true
to
that
$100,000.
no, I also for sperm, that sperm donors and egg donors are sometimes compensated according to who they are. That's true. But I think very few people will pay for that if they can use their own. Or very few people will say, yeah, I kind of suck, but here's this other person who's great, and I'm going to use their eggs, right? I can't imagine people thinking like that.
Really? Another question. Yes, okay. I was looking for other women for questions because that's too much of a men conversation here, including me, by the way.
Yeah, so, great idea. My name is Yuri van Geest. I do have one concern, though. Let's assume my daughter, 13 years old, now, eggs frozen, she's 30 or 40. I wonder, it probably will impact her mating, her dating behavior. Because if she meets a man and he didn't froze his own sperm, then it becomes a selection criteria, right? So how do you see this evolve over time in terms of the dating and mating behavior?
Well, I think the older guys would carry signs saying, I have frozen sperm. No, I think it will completely change the dynamics in favor of women. Let's say, I think women are in a difficult position now. They have a pressure that men don't have. I don't see too many 30, 40-year-old guys saying, if I don't have a baby next year, I'm doomed. I think they probably couldn't care less. I think Prelude will alert them to the risks of not having frozen your sperm, or there are risks of becoming older when you have a child. But I also think it will bring equality to women, that women will not have this gun on their head. It will kind of stop their biological clock and their anxiety. They will, maybe a lot of divorces have to do with this anxiety to marry young. As they say, choose the first idiot before you're 34. And so I think people will make better choices under a little less pressure.
Other questions? Yes, white shirt here, thank you.
So I guess a lot of us are outside from US. Do you have any plan of global expansion? If so, like, do you have any timeline?
Where are you from?
I'm from Japan, so I would like to know when are you coming to Japan?
Yeah, well, my last company, Phone, became the largest Wi-Fi network in Japan, and thanks to that, I went a lot to Japan and discovered a lot of things about Japan, including that it has one of the lowest fertility rates in the world. It's incredible how few children the Japanese have. And once I asked a Japanese friend of mine, but without immigration, how are you going to solve this problem? And he said, robots, right? Now, as a believer as I am of robots, I have a hard time thinking that robots will give you this nurturing, emotional company that humans give you. And I would recommend to have humans, if anything, for companionship and love. And so I think this is desperately needed in Japan. I would hope to go to Japan, Korea,
But that
China.
supposes that they want more kids. Maybe they don't.
Well, that's a good point.
You could just make more
That's
kids
a good point.
artificially.
But
sure.
I think Japan is a very work-like culture. The clash we have here is really that you're telling women they have to work their ass off, do their degrees, fight for their careers, and when they're about to make it, get off the labor force, have a child. Like it's an unfair position to women. And many women say, okay, fine, I leave. Many of them find it hard to have a compatibility between work. And I think that in Japan, which is my Japanese employees at my other company, Phone, are an incredibly hardworking, devoted group of people. Sometimes I have to say, go home, see your families. Like, I don't know if you agree with me being from Japan,
that's
but
your
it's
Spanish background where the siesta at 3
right, I'm like more like Latino, I'm like, please. And,
which doesn't prevent from succeeding.
But having said this, I really think that having children reliably between 38 and 42, 44 would do a lot for Japanese fertility. And I think Prelude would help those women who finally want to have children and they can't.
I know there are many more questions, but unfortunately we
ran
out
of
of time. But would you, you like close this session with a
No,
view of the future?
look, I try to build companies that make people better off, and I can't think of one that will make more people better off than this one. I hope I convince millennials to think ahead. That's going to be my biggest challenge. But I think when you think of contraception, it's not a bad idea to also think about conception.
Great. Thank you very much, Martin.
Thank you.